Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the seventh session of the summer term 2026 of SunoikisisDC Digital Classics. This term, as you know very well by now, is dedicated to exploring digital scholarly editions in classics, Byzantine, and medieval studies. Today's session will be dealing with digital humanities for Greek and Latin linguistics and philology. And our speakers today are truly authorities in this field and are Valeria Boano, Francesca Dell'Oro, and Francesco Mambrini. And as always, if you're watching live, that is today, June 9th, 2026, feel free to write in the live comment section of the YouTube video. And of course, tell us where you're watching and ask questions or leave comments that our speakers will address at the end of the session. I know I say this all the time that we have a lot to cover and too little time, but this time is really true because we have three speakers that have each a lot to say. So without further ado, I'd like to leave the floor to today's speakers. And I think, Valeria, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to this seminar. My name is Valeria Boano, and I am a PhD student at Leuven University in Belgium. So today I would like to present you a methodology that I've been using in my project that shows how we can fruitfully use annotation to deal with interpretation of literary text. So I will start straight away. First of all, why should we digitally annotate a Latin corpus? This is because semantic annotation and linguistic annotation can be used together to analyze previously debated scholarly issues from a new angle with a distant reading approach. If semantic annotation and linguistic annotation are not completely clear to you, I hope that during the presentation this will become clearer. But semantic annotation allows to easily extract information about entities mentioned in the text, whereas linguistic annotation enables the analysis of the linguistic features in a big corpus. And in particular, I'm applying this methodology to the Naturalis Historia by Pliny the Elder. As many of you may already know, the Naturalis Historia is a Latin encyclopedia of the 1st century AD, and it is considered a many-voiced work because here many people are mentioned both as sources or as protagonists of episodes. We are sure that the author Pliny was citing the sources and the person consciously because he himself states it in the preface of the first book. So we can explore the mentions of those individuals in the encyclopedia within their textual context to try to understand the mechanics of the selection that was performed by the author. In particular, I'm focusing on books 2-6, which are the geographical and astronomical topics, which contain the geographical and astronomical topics. And this project is part of the Meccano Doctoral Network. And if you want, you can have a look at what the network is about. So I'll start by telling you what was the data and what was the methodology that I've been using. So I set up a digital pipeline that consists of 3 steps. The first step consists of creating a high-quality digital corpus. So when we perform semantic annotation and when we deal with the identification of individuals, it's very, very important that we work with high-quality digital text. This is because different individuals, different version of the text could point to completely different persons. And so it's very important that we assess the quality of the text, both on the philological level and on the formatting level. So I started from the reference critical edition, the one by Mayhoff. This was provided in OCR formats, OCR-generated formats by the Perseus Digital Library. And for those who don't know, OCR means optical character recognition and means automatic converting images containing text into machine-readable formats. However, this process is very often brings error in the digital version of the text. So sometimes we have inconsistent capitalization, or we have different, the wrong vowels, for instance, or the wrong letters. I started specifically from a version of the text which had already been tokenized and lemmatized by Clarice. So tokenization means that the text, the long string of text was already broken down into smaller pieces that we could unprecisely define words or consider as words. And lemmatized means that each token, so each word, was linked to its own citation format, so to its lemma. So I decided to correct my text, which was not of good quality. I corrected the OCR errors, and I also integrated different variant readings in my text, variant readings coming from another critical edition, the one edited by Conte. Of course, I'm not publishing a new edition, so it was very, very important to add my modification in such a way that made it possible to always retrieve the original version of the text. So my text is stored in a relational database where the data is stored in one or more tables that are linked between each other. And here, each word has a unique ID. So exploiting this unique ID, it was possible to encode multiple versions of the text while always being able to retrieve the Mayhoff edition and also to distinguish between the different types of modifications. The second step consisted of adding the annotation. So my text already included tokenization and lemmatization, but it was not very well done. So I decided to perform a better lemmatization and also to add part of speech tagging. And part of speech tagging means to assign the part of speech. So, for instance, verb, noun, adjective to the token. So I could not afford doing that manually. So I decided to try with some automatic models to find the best one, the best performing one. To do so, I tried and then I evaluated the first 1,000 tokens of the text as a sample. And at the end, the model that resulted the best one was the Collatinus model. And without going too much into detail, the Collatinus model performed very well because it was trained on the Laszlo corpus, which is a classical Latin corpus that had been manually annotated. So basically, the model learned from this corpus, and it was later enriched with a more sophisticated model, which is called Latin-BERT. On the other hand, for the semantic annotation, I could not rely on a completely automatic annotation. So first of all, what I performed was the named entity recognition, which entails the identification, automatic identification and classification of proper names in running text into predefined categories. Specifically, I was working with persons, so I annotated the persons defined as any identifiable single individual following these already published guidelines. So I included, for instance, also deities, but then I also defined my own project-specific annotation guidelines. Then I tried using this Latin-BERT model that was fine-tuned on this task. So basically, it was specialized on this task. But when I corrected the results and evaluated the model, I realized I could not completely rely on it. Indeed, there was a very bad precision. So I had a lot of entities which were not persons, but had been automatically annotated as persons. And this is due to the nature of my text, where I have a lot of population and places that are mentioned only here. And so the model was not able to correctly disambiguate them. Still, I was able to correct my results in a smoother and faster way, thanks to the exploitation of the already implemented linguistic annotation and also the corrected OCR. So, for instance, I could look at all the capitalized words, being sure that the capitalization was correct. And also, for instance, I could look at the proper nouns to speed up the process. So I could say that I worked with a semi-automatic approach. The third step consisted of linking my retrieved persons to external knowledge bases, and I chose Wikidata and the Real Encyclopedia. So Wikidata is a free, open, and collaborative knowledge base, and the main advantage of it is that it contains structured data. So this means that for each item of the encyclopedia, of the knowledge base, we have multiple properties which link to determined values. And so, for instance, in the case of the person Marcus Varro, we have, among the other properties, the citizenship property, which links to the value ancient Rome. And so this makes the knowledge base very easy to be exploited. At the same time, being a collaborative knowledge base, every time that I could not find the person that was mentioned in my text, I was able to create a new item. And so I had, at the end, a complete coverage of my corpus, and also I enhanced the coverage of Wikidata itself. The Real Encyclopédie instead is a fundamental prosopographical work for the ancient world, and it is available in a Wikisource digitized format. The entities had been previously extracted as part of another project and inserted in another database, part of the Trismegistus environment. And here again, we have a unique identifier for each entry, and so we are able to link the entry of the Real Encyclopédie to the mention in the text. So at this point, we reach the moment where we bridge between the annotation and the interpretation. So we discuss the extraction and modeling of the information. So when I extracted my information from Wikidata, I chose to extract the instance of property, which regards the type of entity, the citizenship, the language, the occupation, and the sex or gender. So at the end, I ended up with a database with all my entire text, and each mention of a person was enriched with this specific information, but at the same time, it was kept in its textual context. And so this is very important, because in this way, when we perform our analysis, we can take into consideration both the external information and the text itself, which is very important. However, the property values contained heterogeneous information, and you could see that from the, for instance, from the values of the occupation property, which are multiple, but also for the citizenship, we have not only one values for ancient Greece, for instance, but we have multiple one. So I had to model my data in a uniform way in order to be able to use it for my analysis. So I started dividing my entities into categories. First of all, I had a true and false value for humans, which was based on the instance of value. I had, again, a true-false value for authors. And in this case, I based myself on the occupation value, and I considered authors those persons which had at least one authorial occupation in the list. This was not without errors, so at the end, I had to manually check the results, and I was also able to compare with the list of sources that Pliny himself provides in the preface, in order to spot other inconsistencies and have a clean data. Then I decided to focus on citizenship and language. For citizenship, I divided my individuals in 5 groups: Rome, Greece, Africa, Asia, and Germanic area. Whereas for the language, I divided them into Latin, Greek, and other. So for the geographic criterion for the citizenship, I followed a very basic modern criterion. And at the end, I was able to separately model 2 aspects which right now do not align with our modern conception. So, for instance, we know many individuals of Greek culture and language lived on the African and Asian continent. So by having a different model for language and citizenship, I'm able to analyze the aspects which I want, basically. And this is just to give you an idea of what kind of individuals I had in my corpus. On the left, you see the distribution of the instance of labels. And of course, we have a lot of humans and a lot of Roman deities. Whereas on the right, you see the occupation labels. So this regards only humans. And again, as probably expected, we have mostly writers that are sources and politicians. Sometimes the writers are also politicians. And who are these persons? Here you can have a general idea. And the most cited was Alexander the Great, whereas the second one is Agrippa. So at this point, I had my enriched database, and the following step was to actually interpret my data. So I decided to start from a research question which regards the relationship between Pliny, the Greeks, and other nationalities. And so scholarship in this regard has been divided. Some scholars considered that Pliny had a critical relationship with the Greeks, which were considered responsible of the moral decline of Rome, whereas others stated that Pliny had a great admiration for the Greek authorities and that he was critical only towards bad quality sources. So basically, the criticism was not related to the geographical origin, but rather to the content of the work itself. So I wanted to see if it was possible to try to shed a light on this problem using my semantic annotation. And so I used a Python code, a very simple one, to perform a first analysis of the distribution of the nationalities to try to answer these first very general questions. And this was the first result that I had. So this graph shows how many individuals of each nationalities are mentioned every 1,000 tokens. And we see that the Romans are the most cited, but that also the other groups are pretty well represented, apart from the Germanic area. Also very interesting was that the topic of the book had an influence on the persons represented, because book 3 is about the geography of Italy, and here we see a lot of Romans. Book 4 is about the geography of Greece, and here we see more blue, so more Greeks. And finally, book 5 is about geography of Africa, and book 6 is about geography of Asia. And here again, we see a correspondence of the people mentioned. But what happens if we restrict our results only to authors and not authors? So I had my filter, so it was rather easy to just check what changed when looking at authors. And the results was, again, interesting, because I could see that not authors were mostly Romans, and also that people from Asia and Africa are mostly not authors, whereas the authors are mostly Greeks. The only exception where we see more Greeks also in the not author graph is the book 6, but here Alexander the Great is mentioned a lot, and he is not always mentioned as a source. At the same time, even if we see that there are so many Greeks mentioned as authors, we still see a lot of red, so a lot of Romans. And so at this point, I asked myself, what is the relation between the unique individuals and the number of citations per each unique individual? And this graph shows you how often is each unique author cited on average per book. And this is, again, quite interesting, because book 2 and book 5 showed a predominance of the Greeks. Book 6 has a tie, basically, but in book 3 and book 4, the Romans are cited much more often on average. And if we look at the number, this is even more evident. And one could argue that maybe, since book 3 is about the geography of Italy, this could be predictable, but book 4 is about the geography of Greece. And here we have these 4 Latin authors that are mentioned 22 times, and I put their names so you can know them: Agrippa, Varro, Mucianus, and Nepos. And Agrippa alone was mentioned 12 times. So he was really, I could say, the man of the book. And if we look at the totality of the 5 books, again, the results are interesting, because we see that 24 Latin authors, which actually are not so many, were mentioned more than 100 times. And if we look at the average, at the total average, we see again that there is a predominance of citations of Latin authors. So when I looked at authors specifically, I used the language value rather than the citizenship one, because I was more interested in basically the language of their works. So in general, I could see that in terms of number of authors, the Greeks are predominant. So there is a majority of Greek sources. But Latin sources are cited more often. And in particular, there is a top 5 Latin authors that are mentioned a great number of times. And this gives us a first idea of Pliny's preference for the Roman sources, even if he could not actually do without the Greek ones. Of course, this does not automatically mean that he despised the Greeks, but already says something. So in conclusion, with this presentation, I wanted to show you that the semantic annotation can be fruitfully integrated with a more traditional approach to the study of the text. And the main takeaways that I would like you to take away are the importance of the textual quality, because when we deal with semantic information, we deal with the meaning of the text. And so it's very, very important that we take care of the quality of the text. Then secondly, the integration of automatic and manual approaches that can really help to smooth the annotation process. So one is not forced to use only one of them, and often the integration of both is really what makes the process faster. And finally, the importance of linking the information to elements in the text while keeping them in their textual context. This is crucial because in this way, we are able both to exploit the information that comes from other resources and also to take into consideration their textual context indeed. So finally, for the exercise, I prepared a Python notebook that you can find at this link. It's a Google Colab, so it should be rather easy to be used. It's very important that first you create a copy on your own drive, because otherwise you would overwrite the code for everybody. And on the GitHub, you will find a sample of my dataset, which contains only book 2. So now you can see the notebook. You can upload it here. So you click on the folder image. You wait a moment for it to connect, and then you can click on upload to session storage and you upload your file. Then it should be rather easy to just follow the notebook because I commented it a lot. So all the process is described, and you will be able to perform the same analysis that I did. So you will create the filter for authors. You will divide the persons in their geographical groups, and at the end you will be able to produce a small version of the same graph, only on book 2, of course. The same holds for the language, and you will have at the end your graphs, basically. That's all. Thank you for your attention. And yes, if you have any questions for later, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Valeria. And now I will put Francesca on the screen, because unfortunately I lost. I don't see anything anymore, so I'm doing this blindly. So please shout if I'm putting something wrong. I should have put Francesca's slides now on.
Hi, can you confirm?
Can you see them?
Hi, can you confirm that you can see my slide deck?
Yes, we can.
Great.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for inviting me to contribute to this SunoikisisDC session on digital humanities, linguistics, and philology. It is a fortunate coincidence, but just a coincidence, really, that the second session also addresses proper names, although from a different perspective. In this session, or in this part of our session, we will explore ancient Greek anthroponymy through the lens of a new edition of the corpus of lead tablets from Styra. First, I will provide some background information on the tablets from Styra, and then I will explain how they have been edited, partly according to epigraphic or more epigraphic conventions, and partly according to philological or more philological principles. And after that, I will focus on their linguistic features, The exercises we will be working on are related, one to encoding a critical apparatus and the other on encoding linguistic information. The corpus of the LED tablets from Styra comprises approximately 500 LED tablets inscribed mainly with personal names in the nominative. They date to around 475 BC and they were found in Euboea and more precisely near the city of Styra in southern Euboea. These are the modern villages, and these tablets were found, we don't know exactly where, but somewhere between the area between Nea Styra and Styra. These tablets were used for voting, drawing lots, and or recording a citizen's presence. As such, they provide valuable evidence for the history of civic institutions, political organization, and public democratic life in ancient Greece. The tablets were discovered together in a single vase, most likely after they had been discarded. At least this is my hypothesis. Some exhibit clear signs of reuse with multiple layers of writing visible on the same tablet. I will show you this before going on. So, for example, here we have a case of reuse, and we see part of the more recent name, Antimacho, in the genitive. Genitives are quite rare. And as you can see, we see a nu here, and then tau, and then iota, and then part of the mu. And behind or under this letter, we see the more ancient name, and this is Dicios. And we see here the kappa, and then iota, and then omicron here, and here is the sigma. These names are written in the Euboean dialect, so they reflect the Euboean dialect, and more specifically the southern variety of the Euboean dialect. So since May, so a new study has been available, and this includes a new edition of the corpus. The book is freely accessible online, while the digital edition is still underway. And this work was made possible by a close collaboration with the Swiss School of Archaeology in Greece, and I take the opportunity to thank them most warmly. Okay, so some of the tablets are still extant and in good shapes, so to say. We have well-preserved examples, two, however, highly fragmentary ones. Some other specimens are lost, but they were recorded and edited by earlier scholars. This is the picture, and so the edition has been done applying two different editorial approaches. One is, as I said in the beginning, more epigraphic, and the other one is more philological. And of course, in some cases, so for example, for fragmentary tablets, we need to combine the two approaches. Here, for example, you can see a case where the tablet is still very easy, very easily legible. And so the edition is not very complicated. So as you can see here, using, for example, TI XML encoding. But, for example, in other cases, as here, we have just different readings. So we have the first reading was Lochagos here, and we have a second reading which is Aglochares. And the first editor also gave us a drawing. And so we have to decide on a more philological basis what we choose as the reading. And so this is why in this case it is useful to have an apparatus. With regard to personal names, it is worth to remember that semantic transparency was a pervasive, if not systematic, feature of attributing personal names in ancient Greece, and more in general also in ancient Indo-European cultures. So people knew the meaning of the others' names. So, for example, Democritus was a transparent name, was the one chosen by the people, and so on. Pericles was the very glorious one, and Socrates was the one of save strength. But this is no longer the case in modern English or Italian, for example, unless you are a philologist, of course, or unless you have a very transparent name, such as Joy or Gioia. Moreover, attributing a name, giving the name, was also based on psychological and sociocultural factors. For example, Alexandros is a name attested from the most ancient Greek age, but only after the conquests of Alexander the Great, this name became widespread because it became closely associated with the historical figures of Alexander the Great. And using one of two databases I want to show you today. So one is this is the LGPN. This is the database of the project Lexicon of Greek Personal Names, which is very useful if you want to perform historical and geographical researches. And the other database is LGPN Ling, which is a kind of linguistic continuation of LGPN. And the second one, LGPN Ling, is very useful for linguistic analysis. Let me go back to the name Alexandros. In this chart, you can see that the name becomes widespread starting with the 3rd century BCE. Otherwise, it is attested, but it is not a widespread name. And so this is, of course, related to the importance of Alexander the Great. Now, okay. So I would like to show you how you could use this resource. This is the LGPN Ling database. It is ideal for working on linguistic analysis, in particular the etymology, morphology, and semantics of the ancient Greek proper names. And so, for example, here I have taken one of the proper names appearing on the Styra tablets. This is Aglochares, and you can see here you have information of different nature. So, for example, about the declension. But also here linked to the LGPN, you have information about the occurrences of the name as a lemma. So basically there are two individuals bearing this name, Aglochares, and we see that for when we see here the geolinguistic part, we see that for Cycladic Ionic we have two variants. So Aglochares, which is also attested in Euboean on the Styra tablet, and the other variant is Aglocharos. And of course, you have to choose one of the two variants has to become the lemma. So in this case, Aglochares. And as you can see, we have here also a linguistic analysis. So we have a compound name with two bases, and the first one aglaua, meaning here sparkling, brilliant, and the second one meaning rejoiced. Then we have the analysis from the point of view of the corresponding parts of speech. So we have an adjective and a verb, and then from the point of view of the microsyntax, we have a modifier and the head. So Y is the modifier and X is the head. So this name meant something such as rejoicing in splendor. So when editing the corpus, it was important to have the reading on the tablet, but also to have a reference document with the lemma, with all the lemmata. Another important point is the annotation of linguistic and onomastic information. So, for example, if we have geographical variants, frequencies of attestation, for example, in this corpus, many names correspond to apaxes, and it is also important, of course, to have external identifiers, and this can be managed through, for example, authority files. So, for example, in this case, we can encode the geographical variation. This is a special case because this proper name, edited in the new edition as Timines, was previously edited as Timnies. But we know that there are two variants, and these are Timinas. Timinas is attested in Northwest Doric and in Boeotian. So it is probable that the person who wrote this name in the form Timnies, which is the form which is attested, which is written on the tablet, just inverted two letters. So very likely this name should be read Timines and not Timnies, as it is registered, for example, in the lexicon of Greek personal names, but not anymore in the lexicon of Greek personal names Ling, the linguistic continuation. And so what I wanted to show was that epigraphic and philological approaches can be combined in editing these tablets, and also that we can use XML TEI to encode information about linguistic features. For the exercise, there you will find 2 files without the solutions in the folder in GitHub, and you can use this slide because here you see the apparatus for the name Euteles, and here you can see the readings that were previously provided, and the exercise consists in encoding the apparatus. Okay, and there is also the solution, but look it later, please. And the other exercise is about encoding diatopic variants. In this case, for the name Cleogenidas. On the tablets, we find Cleogenides and the varia Clogenides. So basically here in the LGPN link, we have as lemma this South Doric form. On the tablets, we find Ionic variants, both Cleonides and Clonides. And also in this case, you find the file without the solution, and you also find the file with the solution, but I'll look into it later. And I thank you, and I let the floor to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Francesca. And now I will remove your slides and put Francesco's slide on the screen.
Thank you very much, Martina. Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me here, and to the students, of course, for being here for this lecture. Now I will switch to full screen the slides. Tell me if there is any problem, or if you can still see my slides well enough. Also, later on, I will switch to the browser, so tell me if the screen is not readable, please. Okay, so I will switch away from, I will move away from the topics of named entities and personal names and names in general, or what Valeria has rightly called the semantic annotation, and move to the other annotation that Valeria mentioned, linguistic annotation. So the annotation in texts of proper linguistical features, what we even in common language and common parlance we would call like more grammatical features of the text. And I will introduce a subject that is very dear to me, the one of tree banks of ancient languages, of course. So what is a tree bank in general? In linguistic, by tree bank we mean an annotated corpus, so a group of texts, collection of texts that has been annotated with a series of metadata and with a lot of information that relates to its morphosyntactic features. So it introduced, this is a series of layer of comment, we could say, about the linguistic features of text, and in particular something like what Valeria has already mentioned, like the part of speech tag. So it would tell you of every words if there are they are verbs, nouns, etc., etc. Lemmatization, which for students of Greek and Latin, it's something that might have like a very complicated name, but it's fairly easy to understand what we mean by it. I mean, what words do you search in a vocabulary wherever you read a word form? So the fact that, for example, I don't know, even in this in the sentence that you see here, you won't find geme, this Greek verb, which is a form of the verb. You would find gemo. So gemo, it's the lemma of this verb, but also a way of describing the syntactic relations between words into the the text that we are annotating. So whenever we are doing a tree bank of a text, we're including a tree bank into, a text into a tree bank, we need to perform a series of operations. We'll see that in more detail in a second. First of all, we need to prepare this, to divide this into units that we can analyze. And the first, since we are talking about syntax, the first units that we need is the one of the sentence. Okay, so we need to divide the text into sentence. But then every sentence is split into its elements. So that we technically call tokens, which might roughly correspond to the notions of words. So every words, we could say, in a text is annotated. And then yes, every token, like every particle, every small adverb, every small words, no matter how trivial it might seem to you, and even every punctuation marks, if your corpus contains punctuation marks, is annotated, receive the annotations that makes up for a tree bank. In order to have a tree bank, you need to have a formalism, a way to describe the syntactic relations of words. And there are a few of them, but the tree banks of ancient Greek and Latin adopt a formalism that is called dependency grammar. I would not enter into the detail, but basically what you have is that the words are put into relation one to each other. Pretty much, it's like what you are taught in language classes whenever you say that, for example, a subject depends on a verb, or goes with, or an adjective goes with a noun. Yeah, so this you establish the relations between words directly. So you say that, for example, an adjective is dependent on the noun that governs it as an adjectival modifier, for example, something like that. Now, tree banks have been around for languages, for all the languages in the world, since the 90s. First of all, of course, was English. But the history of tree banks for Greek and Latin is particularly interesting. It starts around the mid-2000s, and it goes through a series of landmarks. In 2009, the first important collection of ancient Greek texts was published, with the full text of the Homeric poems, for example. And then in 2014, another important project that featured also Greek and Latin tree bank, called Universal Dependencies, was started. Now, this is to give you an idea. We will talk about that in a second, a little more. This is also to give you a quantitative idea of the situation in 2019. This is a slide that I often use. You see that, okay, we have a pretty consistent collection for Greek. This is just for the slides only shows Greek tree bank. We have a pretty consistent collection published by Perseus of what is called the Ancient Greek and Latin Dependency Tree Bank. The Greek part has roughly 500,000 annotated words, and it contains mostly the Homeric poems, some tragedies, and a few prose texts. But then Vanessa Gorman, professor in the University of Nebraska, started a collection of prose texts that some of them are also in Perseus, but not many of them in the AGLDT, I mean, and it's now published independently. It's called the Gorman tree most of the time. There are other interesting projects. One of them is, for example, the Sematia, the Papi Greek corpus that deals with documentary papyri. Also, since the development, the widespread adoption of transformers model and language models like of the latest generation, a lot of people have been providing huge collection of annotated data. So corpora of many millions of Greek words that were automatically annotated, that you can download, browse, and sometimes even search and use online. Two of them are the Opera Greca Annotata by Giuseppe Celano and Glauques by Alec Kersmakers in Leuven. Now, as I told you, you have, for every sentence and every tokens within a sentence, you have a lot of information in a tree bank that relates to its morphological, morphosyntactic stages. Whenever you download a tree bank, this is what you get generally. Something like that is what you get. This is, for example, a file from the Ancient Greek and Latin Dependency Tree Bank by Perseus. The text is cut up. As you see, if you are familiar with that, it's you might recognize that this is an XML-based formalism. So it uses the XML syntax to cut the text into sentences and tokens. For every tokens, you have like a lot of information, like the lemma and morphological annotation. For example, in the polis, the word ID number 1, you can see that the form polis is annotated with the lemma polis. Okay, it's easy, it's nominative, and it's also analyzed as NSFN, means as a noun, singular, feminine, nominative. But you also see that that there is also some information about the syntax, the head and relation. You see that, for example, polis is dependent on the word head. The 6 means that it depends on the word added with ID 6. So the main verb, geme, which in its turn depend on the head 0, means the whole sentence. It's the root of the sentence. As and SBJ, which means the subject, and so on. So this is a formalism to describe the syntactic relations. Now, typically, when you do annotation, no matter the workflow that you adopt, you start with the model. You use a model that it's called a pipeline. So you have like a chain of modules where the output of a service becomes the input of the following one. So most of the time you adopt a semi-automatic workflow where you let some models perform at least a rough, coarse-grained passage of annotation that you later review manually. And you use a series of models that are chained in this sort of workflow called the pipeline, so that you have, for example, your prototypical pipeline for tree-bank annotation starts from the raw text. It goes through a tokenizer that it's the module that is responsible for chunking the text into sentences and then separating the different units, the different words to be annotated. Then it passes the output of this tokenizer to a part-of-speech taggers that perform the part-of-speech tagging, and a lemmatizer that perform the lemmatization, and then on and on. You can put as many layers on top of it. Obviously, for a tree-bank, after the lemmatizer, you would need a syntactic parser that analyzes the syntactic relations, a dependency parser, in this case, if you want to do dependency syntax like the one that we've been seeing up to now. But you can also add other components in your pipeline. So I already shown you that there are a lot of projects in that produce and publish tree banks in ancient Greek, and now more of them have been added with the coming, of this large collection of automatic annotation. So how's the situation for Greek tree banks right now? Well, we have a lot of data, so it's good, except that there are a lot of inconsistencies in quite a lot, actually, of different areas, including even character encoding, so that not the projects don't even agree on the type of Unicode encoding to represent the characters. And then tokenization is not done consistently across all the different projects. Part-of-speech tagging is not done consistently, so the same words might be tagged differently according to the project, etc., etc. And there are also other limits in the situation so far. So, for example, I see that the projects that use models like the Opera Greca Annotata or the Glaucs have like a lot of text that have been annotated with those models, but they don't often provide the models with them. So what if I want to use it to text that have not been annotated as yet? I would like to have that as well. But then also, what about research tools? Okay, I showed you, for example, one file that you can download for the ancient Greek and Latin dependency tree-bank, but it's quite hard to work with that. How can I query it? Okay, some projects give you query tools, but then again, you are limited to what you can do with what the software developers did, and there aren't many tools. What about extensions? What about if I want to add other layers of annotation like named entities or the type of semantic annotation that was discussed previously? There is a lot of room for improvement. And I think one of the most interesting places where you can look for at least an environment framework to solve some of those problems is that project called Universal Dependencies that I mentioned before. What is universal dependencies? We can say that it's three things. I shared you in the bibliography of this class a link to to an article that says that universal dependencies is basically three things. It's a community. So a community of people that developed a community standard. So a set of guidelines for morphosyntactic annotation. So a series of rules on how to annotate and produce tree bank. And it's also a big collection of tree banks for more than 100 languages, ancient and moderns, with different varieties and more than 200 tree banks at this moment. Why it is interested? Because it's supported by a large community. There are many tools that are already available with that, many extensions that have already existed and are still developed. And probably this is the most interesting, I think, for those who study ancient languages, because it's made to promote interlinguistic and typological research. So if you adopt this set of guidelines and this standard, you already have like not only ancient Greek data, not only Latin data, but also, I don't know, ancient Slavic tree bank for ancient Slavic, tree bank for, I don't know, early Italian, tree bank for other ancient Indo-European languages like Sanskrit. How many, all the different tree banks that you might want to, all the different, there may be documentation, is what I mean, for as many languages you might want to compare with your starting data. And it's also a place where some of the problems with, for example, tokenization or non-standardized way of treating phenomena can be considered. It's also a place where there are a lot of interesting resources and tools for example, search. This is one that I will show you briefly in a second, already exist. So we don't need to program, for example, a query tool for texts. Now, how do we solve the problems of inconsistency? Well, this is a pretty difficult questions. There is a lot of research that is been already done. I will tell you very, very briefly that there are at least two approaches that you can work on. One is what we would call a rule-based approach. So you have rules that, for example, you say that an adjective must agree with in terms of genre, a number, and case with the noun it belongs to. If an arc of an adjectival modifier does not respect this criteria, you might flag it as a possible inconsistency. There is another one, which is also very interesting, that is based on, for example, the detection of a series of repeated sequences, like repeated words, which are technically called n-grams, where we can see whether those resources are, whether these n-grams are treated systematically. I'll show you very briefly one example where you can find the inconsistencies. My favorite is probably the number 17, where you have like a numeric formula, epineusin Achaion, to the ships of the Achaeans, where you can see that there is an inconsistency in the annotation, because somebody, pretty much as Valeria has already discussed, took the ethnonymics Achaeans once as an adjective, once as a noun. There is no right or wrong solutions in this type of case, but the point is that one consistent solution must be adopted and enforced. So either you take all the ethnonymics and you lemmatize and tag it with the corresponding adjective of the people, or you make it like a noun, plural noun for the whole people, and you consistently annotate this type of use in this way. What you can't possibly have, because otherwise your research tool becomes much less usable, is a situation like that where you have like a mixed solution. This type of approaches are useful to interrogate, to detect this type of problems. Now, what I propose as an exercise, I uploaded a couple of files in the data section. I will show you in a second. Couple of Greek and one in Latin. We can use a pipeline. I'll show you my favorite in a second. It's called UDPipe to annotate automatically this tool. We can download a tree-bank file, and then we can load it into a tree-bank editor to do some inspection, to see if and even to do some modifications. Now let me show you very briefly what I mean. Here in the resources, you can find a series of links starting from here. Now, some of you might think, yeah, okay, in order to do tree-bank annotation, I must know a language very well, like Latin and Greek. You'd be wrong. You must know two languages very well. One is the language that you're annotating. So either Latin or Greek, or both of them, if you want to engage yourself with both. But also the meta language that we are using for the annotation. So for that, you will really need to know your annotation guidelines very well. At the website of Universal Dependencies, as you saw, you can click on the annotation guideline and review how the different constructions are annotated across the different languages, but they are universal, so they should be common to all the languages. Okay, here let me show you the data that I have prepared. So for here, for example, in the data folder, you can find session 7. There are 3 files. One is the Homeric hymn to Hermes. One is the Helen by Euripides. And the other one in Latin, well, something that I chose. It's part of the Consolation of Philosophy by Boetius. But you can actually choose whatever text you want. For example, one easy thing that you can do is go to the Scaife viewer, Scaife library, where you can have access to a lot of text. In this case, for example, this is the Homeric hymn to Hermes. You can click, for example, on export that as a text, and you can have the whole text exported as a text. This can be very easily used with UDPipe. Let me show you what I mean. For example, from here, if you click on this link, this is UDPipe. This is a pipeline. Well, what you have to do, since these are models that are trained on the different available tree-bank. I'm sorry I'm going a little longer than my allotted slot, but I hope that I am granted a little tolerance. I'm just finishing. So from here, you have to choose a model. For ancient Greek, make sure to select, for example, this one. This one is annotated on the Perseus. Is trained. It's a model for morphosynthetic annotation that it's trained on the AGLDT corpus that I showed you before. So you can choose this one. You can select an input file from here. Make sure, since you have different options on how to analyze the text. If you save it from Scaife, you can go on and well, you can deselect that one. You don't need it, and use the tokenizer. So like that, just like that, you will use a tokenizer. So the tokenizer will be within the pipeline, as I showed you before. So the text is assumed non-tokenized, and the model will do the tokenization for you. If you use, for example, we can expect them as well. If you use, for example, the Helen of Euripides that I showed before, well, you can see that this text is already pre-tokenized. So you can see that here, for example, you can read a manual on the different input formal. This is the vertical text. So for that, we will need to select the vertical option. We can load the file from here, this one, and then process the input. Might take a little while because this is the whole tragedy by Euripides. Now, try to pay attention on what these options mean for the tokenization. It means that horizontal means that you have like the text of the sentence, one line per sentence. Verticals means that like that you have a line separating the sentences and every token in one line. Tokenized as plain text mean that you only have the full sequence of the text. So inspect the different texts that you find in this folder and try to guess which one is the correct tokenizer to have. Now, it has produced an annotation. From here, you can show the different text. And from here, you can already see how the things went. So you see that from here, you have different columns to display the different parts. So here you have like the running text, here you have the lemmatization, you have the part-of-speech tagging, you have a more advanced part-of-speech tagging, and you have more advanced morphological annotation, and here the dependencies, pretty much as in the slide that I showed. And here you can visualize the thing as a tree, because of course, if I say that Heide depends on row I can show this linked as a tree. I would say that this has been annotated pretty decently, except for this part over here, which is not very good. But I can leave it to you, and if you know something about Greek language, to understand what's wrong with that. One thing that is typically wrong with that is that in this guidelines, you cannot have two different direct objects. So there's an error over here. So what do we do if there is an error over here? Well, we can use sorry, yeah, let me go back. Okay, here. Oops. We can use a tool to inspect that. I will not show you that, and probably so if you're already here, that's good enough. But here's my favorite one. So if you want to load everything and modify them in a graphical user interface tool, this one is a good one. It's not a web application, so you cannot load. There are also a web application for doing that, but I don't like them very much because they have a few limitations. But from here, for example, you can download the release. It's a Java application. You will need to have Java installed, but if you follow the instruction over there, you can easily do that. It's absolutely not difficult. And if you want, in the question answering session, I can show you how you can load the tree bank that we've just produced into a tool like that. But since I have already taken a lot of your time, I would probably stop here and leave the rest for the question answering session. So thank you very much for your attention.
Here, Francesco, I'm trying to put us all back on the screen. And I think we're all there, aren't we? Yes. So thank you so much. This was brilliant. And every time that I hear about linguistic annotation, semantic annotation, I want to start a project and do it on my material. Of course, the time is, I mean, at some point I will do this. But before, as always, abusing my time as my role as chairperson, I would say let's ask to the audience if they have questions, comments, or clarifications that they would like to ask to our speakers. But again, today I'm having problems with the system, so I am not even sure that I can see from here comments, which is of course not nice. So I will go to YouTube for a second. Please bear with me. Yeah, because of course, so that's the way you see that this is really live stream. It's not recorded. As we say in Italian, il bello della diretta. So, so I see for now we don't have any questions as for now, so I think I will go ahead and ask just a question of out of curiosity. This doesn't even has to do with linguistic annotation, but I hope you won't mind. And I wanted to ask to Francesca if you with the LED tablets, if you also plan on, or so if you plan on, or if you did any also analysis with like imaging techniques, like if you played a bit with RTI or with 3D modeling, because I mean what you have been describing really reminds me of my own material, which is also LED. And also we have this project at the University of Cologne about the Magica Levantina, where they also have been exploring with all sorts of imaging techniques. That's why, just out of curiosity.
Yes, we used open light, which is a special photographic technique to better see the inscriptions. You get a result similar to a 3D picture, but it is easier to be performed, and it was invented by a French photographer, Carl Colognier, and we took the pictures of the group of tablets in Athens, using this technique. Otherwise, it was too expensive to use other technologies, and I just used the microscope and just light. Yeah. So very classical methods. So the most modern one was open light. Yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting, because we it was quite enlightening what you said about different layers of inscriptions, which is yeah, always let's say a struggle. But no, thank you so much. I mean, and also it's funny because not many people work on inscribed metallic objects. I mean, of course, people work on inscribed metallic objects, but let's say in proportion, epigraphy on stone always win, to put it like that. So yeah, so it was interesting to see a fellow LED person. And yeah, and I keep keep having a look at the YouTube chat.
This corpus is really the only epigraphic record that we have from the region of Styria, and so we for the classical period at least. So it is very important. At least it was very important to me, because I wanted to know more about the differentiation within the varieties of the Euboean dialect. And of course, we have a lot of material from Eritrea and Nubia. We have also records from Magna Grecia and Sicily, of course, and from other locations. But from Euboea, in particular from southern Euboean, this is really the most important corpus from which we can extract linguistic information about this variety of the dialect.
Wow, that's really impressive, and it's also I mean, very interesting that's particularly your corpus, but actually all the corpora that you have shown. So every time I have to circle back to what to my material. So I work with Byzantine lead seals, and we always say that so they are the cornerstone of Byzantine prosopography. So because there's one seal belongs to one person. So by having this seal, we have this person. So in the prosopography, so prosopography the Middle Byzantine side or prosopography of the Byzantine world, we say that at least 50% of the people are recorded only by the seals they left. Which makes, so I'm taking this from very far away, but which makes it for us impossible. So if you do the addition of a corpus of lead seals and you do it blindly in a way, so you still don't know what's in the corpus, we encountered the very big problem that we couldn't work with authority files of persons because it was potentially an open-end endeavor. So and we decided at the end of the day against having authority files because it's true that one seal belongs to one person, but it can also be that two seals belong to one person. And if several people work on the same corpus, then, there's a whole lot of problems that, duplications, and of course, IDs are super important. So a single person would get two IDs or two people would get the same ID, and all the things. So I just wanted to ask to you people working with personal names, how do you cope with this, and where does it get where do the lines get blurred between onomastics and prosopography? Because at some point, if you have, in our case, John, for example, in Byzantine Ioannis is a very widespread name, but you don't know if these 5 seals that you have actually belong to the same John or to 5 different Johns. And at some point, sorry, very long story, just to have your opinion on how to data manage in this case, because it's more data management than something, let's say, semantic.
Yeah, if I may start, I had very similar problems with the tablets because sometimes we have the same name on more than one tablet, and we don't know exactly if it is the same person or just we have homonyms, so more than one individual with the same name. In the case of this edition, and because it was so the focus was more on linguistic aspects, so for me the priority was to have a linking to what we can consider the lemma. So I was interested in knowing what we find on these tablets is a diatopic variant of a better known name in linguistic terms, or it's just it correspond to the mostly the Attic variant of this name. I haven't worked from a prosopographic point of view, and I let the floor to historians, and I think that it will be very difficult because we don't know very much about the history of these places of the not really of the places, but of the people living in these places, and so we don't know if we can connect this name to someone already known from other sources. but I think there is work for historians and not for me. So I hand on the edition to historians and other people interested in making light on this kind of issues.
Thank you so much. Yeah, please, Valeria, go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
So I encounter not exactly the same problems, but very similar ones, because sometimes we have mentions of persons in Pliny which we don't exactly know to who corresponds, because sometimes, of course, there are homonyms. And in those cases, indeed, when I performed the linking, I did that manually, because in many cases, I really had to go and read the comments. Sometimes comments of different editors had different opinions. Sometimes really the choices between two kings which have the same name and which lived more or less and reigned more or less in the same period. So it's very, very complex to select the one that you the correct one. Also, in other cases, Pliny himself cites the wrong person, and we can spot the error. We can see that he wrote the wrong name. Sometimes he invents names which did not exist, such as Gellianus, which actually was Gellius. So there's no author called Gellianus. So in my case, I used the relational database to encode these variants. So I created other fields where I specified this is another possibility, like using standardized formats, and also if it was an error by Pliny. So at the end, it's possible, if I would like to check, to make an analysis and looking at how many errors Pliny had, I can do that basically. But in general, for the rest, the link to Wikidata, it's what solves the ambiguity, because when there are fathers and sons with the same name, then there is still a different Wikidata item for them, and so we can link it to the specific item, and in this way we disambiguate within the text. However, I did this all manually. In the future, I would like to extend the annotation to the rest of the encyclopedia, because this would, of course, be a great added value given the size of the Naturalis Historia. Still, I don't know if I will be able, because precisely of this, so I cannot manually link the entities in 30 books, because this is too time consuming. So finding a solution to do that automatically, it's quite challenging because of these many homonyms that recur, basically.
Yes, that's pretty much also what we did in the end, because I mean we needed to do this manually, because also I mean by Byzantine history is, let's say, 20 years behind classics and 50 years behind medieval studies in terms of available material. So we needed to do pretty much everything from scratch, and that's why for me, like, the Wikidata approach is something that we will do, and not something that we can refer to, because pretty much there's no Wikidata or very little Wikidata regarding let's say people in Byzantium. Like, there's the main emperors and personalities, but they are from the point of view of sigillography and prosopography, they are the least interesting people, because we already know everything about them in a way. It's of course much more interesting for us to be able to link to a random monk from Asia Minor whose seal is found somewhere in Sicily, and you would like to know why this ever happened. But no, thank you. It's nice to see that so wildly different endeavors have similar problems. That's that's always there. But yeah, and like remaining on the same kind of source, course, and I'm sorry if I'm asking things like for my own benefit, but I wanted to ask. So I'm always very fascinated by tree bank and by like the concept, let's say, of tree banking. And of course, I have never done that, but I've heard so much about it on Sunoikisis because it's a very interesting topic. And it's like the epitome in a way of the ancient classics, if you ask me, because it's like it goes so deep into detail, like little other like few other things. But what I always struggle to understand, and I've been talking about this with Monica for years. So would it so I understand tree banking as something that works amazingly well with long texts, with a lot of no, air quotations, because of course it gives you the possibility of structuring in a meaningful way. But I've always wanted to try a tree bank approach also to, of course, to lead seals. And there we have, however, the complete opposite problem. We have many texts and very small, very repetitive at times. But I still think that it would be interesting. I mean, of course, the layer of linguistic annotation, of course, it would be, and this is something that we've discussed already with Paolo and Daniele 2 sessions ago. But I would know your opinion, Francesco, if I may, on the, let's say, pro and cons of using tree bank for this kind of source.
I don't think there are cons, unless there is, of course, tree banks are pretty time and energy consuming to make.
Yeah.
Of course, if your texts are very simple syntactically, perhaps you don't need a whole corpus. Sorry, a whole tree bank. At the same time, I think that where tree banks really excel, where they are perfect, it's with a lot of seemingly very trivial data, meaning that some of the most interesting things that can be done in a tree bank based. I mean, if you come from classical philology, we all imagine that this is a fantastic way to map, I don't know, interpretations of difficult passages, like, or that specific passage in a text where you don't exactly know what this important word means and how you can take it. And of course, it can be used for that. It can be used to visualize like a structure in a difficult sentence. But where they are fantastic, I guess, it's to have like a lot of data on seemingly trivial phenomena, like I don't know, nominatives agreeing with a verb. So what are the subjects in your, or how is you mentioned, for example, formularity. How is a formula structure? So what you find in the different syntactical positions of this formula. How is this formula variated, in a sense, varied and modified with changes? So even especially for what seems like too trivial in space of a sentence can really become extremely interesting in once you move to a size, yes, that cannot be easily managed by simple memory or simple or human reading. So as soon as you have like, okay, for example, in my case, one of the most interesting things that I studied was on the subject-verb agreement, which one might think, okay, it's very simple stuff. It's not, actually. It's once you have, you can study that at the level of the whole Homer, for example, you start noticing stuff, even in things that would not make any problem, like finding the subject in plain nominative that it's right beside its own verb. Okay, big deal. Yeah, when you have like the whole Homer, it makes like a lot of sense. And also, probably you might, if texts are very short, very simple, you might not need the full tree-bank annotation with the full dependency, but part of speech tagging may already reveal quite a lot in this. So you can have like a series of, again, you can do a lot of quantitative analysis on things that might suggest new ways and new avenues of research.
Definitely. Also, because I mean, I think that even the dependency part would be interesting, because one of the main, let's say, now, I mean, seals are also looked at, thank God, from a philological or linguistic perspective, after a couple of centuries that they were completely disregarded for that. And there's one very interesting topic: when do we go from genitive to dative, and then from dative to accusative? And is this a mistake? Is this just a let's say formularity that you keep having on the one side, Kyrie voithetos odoulo, and then you keep going in genitive because you have in mind, for example, seal of Ioannis, so you keep going in genitive instead of agreeing with the voithi verb. So these are things that we keep, I mean, that nobody has ever written on, in a way, because it's more or less given as given. But this kind of tree-bank would visualize it, and definitely, you know, we could work on quantity on this respect, and try and see.
This is a perfect example.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, okay, we wrote the next project. I mean, I'm kidding, but but yeah, no, that's. But what has always, I think, stopped me in terms of conceiving something regarding tree banking and seals is, of course, the lack of time, because every time that I hear about tree banking, I always understand that it's very, very time consuming, like everything that has to do with annotation, of course. But I think it's so worth it also to open, as you were saying, Francesco, like new untouched avenues of research that one might not really you know, open if it were not for this granularity, in a way. So I think that our time is up, and as always, we could go on for another hour just chatting, but I think that we can say goodbye. And of course, shout to the comment section if you are attending the course with me at the University of Cologne. You have to do the exercises. If you're not, then, I mean, you might want to do the exercise. It's always nice to keep yourself busy after listening to such great presentations, but the difference is that you don't have to send them to me for evaluation. So great, thank you very, very much, Francesco, Francesca, and Valeria, and I'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.